now I will let you a nice keynote talk from Sigi Gruber, and she will also further explain you a bit on the entire framework around these 3 joint actions, that is the strategic research and innovation agenda, and several other aspects that she can address.
Thank you, Wendy. Can you hear me all? And see
yes.
me? Thank you. So first of all, before passing on or invite well together with you to be there, and my thanks, of course, go to the Director of the Middle East Technical University for the invitation, but also to Barish, Mustafa, and Adrian for having invited me to address you. It is a great honor for me actually to give a keynote speech here. It brings me back where we started, but this is such an important day today also to celebrate a new chapter with the start of the Bridges Black Sea project, the connection of these 2 initiatives and projects. Wendy already congratulated you, but let me also do the same. It's quite an achievement to have been selected, and you have really managed to get over this very important milestone. So I have listened to all the different now talks which were given by all the previous speakers. It's always difficult not to repeat. So I'm also slightly changing my talk now, because I don't want to repeat again and again what you all already know. But Barish, you really outlined again the uniqueness of the Black Sea. It's always very interesting to look at that, and also to see how we are now really running up in a situation of ecological debt by overusing and depleting the natural resources. But I remain optimistic, and it's certainly not too late to take action. And to take action was also the call from a group of policymakers, stakeholders, civil society, back in 2016, actually. Everyone says that we started to work in 2017, which is true. But it was triggered off after the Odessa event, when the Commission was asked really to take action, to do something and not leave the Black Sea as an important sea basin behind, because many different activities had already been taken on other sea basins in terms of research and innovation, development of strategic research and innovation agenda, funding, etc. So that was the moment when we tried really together with the colleagues in DG Mare and External Action Service in DG NEAR, at the time it was called differently, to start to bring together, to invite the different stakeholders, policymakers of all the countries, the rivering countries. How can really be, what can be analyzed? What is there? Where are the gaps? Where does action needed? And that led actually to the Burgas vision paper, which is a vision paper that was not enough. We needed to take it forward and develop the strategic research and innovation agenda. And we were, I think it was a fantastic coincidence and a political opportunity to have the Bulgarian presidency, the EU presidency, and followed then by the Romanian presidency of the Council of the EU, which took forward these important initiatives and really delivered 2 strategic really research agendas: the common maritime agenda for the Black Sea, which is, as Patrizia already outlined, the frame within which also the science and innovation pillar is given, is really realized and will be implemented through the strategic research and innovation agenda for the Black Sea, which was launched also in Bucharest on the 8th of May 2019. And so these two agendas will frame, and we heard that already by the previous speakers, the work to follow. So I can only add now, I think, some very personal, because all the policy really important messages were already provided by my previous colleague. And it's not my mandate, nor is it my work now to go also into the specificities of the two projects. That's entirely really up to the project officers and the policy officers. But nevertheless, I just wanted to share with you on a purely personal a couple of very general recommendations which came into my mind when reading through the project descriptions, when going through again the strategic research and innovation agenda, the Burgas paper, etc. So all this which frames. So allow me really now to look why are these two new projects going to be so important? First of all, both fully focus on delivering on the strategic research and innovation agenda. And this is described in all the details, and it is really great really to see how this will unfold. So you took it as an overall frame, and hopefully you will implement it also in real activities. Secondly, both focus on very complementary aspects, those really leveraging on what has already been done in the past. So the many other projects, they go actually back to the 7th framework program, just to mention the Coconut, the Perseus project, or the SEAS AeroNet, but also those which have been funded already in Horizon 2020 with around 20 million of a financial envelope. So really leveraging and take this further. Thirdly, both projects have put forward complementary methodologies and activities for reaching the state objectives, and I will come back to this. Fourthly, they bring together so many of the key players. I would actually say the crème de la crème of the partners, the research institutions, the experts around the Black Sea, but also in the wider EU and European context, which is very important. So, for example, what struck me is the integration of, as well, the very important marine-related infrastructure projects, those which are ERICS, but also those which hopefully will become, which are in the SRIA roadmap. Just to mention, for example, what the DOORS project has put forward. And last but not least, both projects connect with many key stakeholders, but also with citizens around the Black Sea. And needless to say that these two, and I call them twin projects, of course they did hit all the requested requirements, otherwise they would not have been funded. But the real work will now start when you really have to implement. Yeah? So there is so much scope now for and resources for looking really into capacity building, into training, into guaranteeing joint access to infrastructures and cruises, sharing the planning, the joint planning of cruises, sharing of data and technologies, testing the outcomes, disseminating activities, outreach activities, fostering on entrepreneurship and really innovation, including the social innovation aspect. So there is so much scope for all this. These are just some of the common features. There are many more, but I would like just to deliver a couple of recommendations to the project coordinators and to partners. And I will also come up with some questions to you, which then you might be able to answer, and we can check whether you actually, how you will implement that. Our world is really moving at an unprecedented speed, and there are four fundamental challenges which are unfolding constantly. They're constantly conditioning also what we are all doing. They will have an impact. They might actually require that you adjust direction and you readjust overall activities. And I just mentioned them. One is the change in technology, which is triggering a societal transformation. Then there is the climate change, which constantly questions our assumptions and confronts us with new challenges. There are new geopolitical drivers with shifts of interest and power. And then there is the pandemic, which calls for deep reflection, not only in terms of scientific evidence, but also on how science is communicated to citizens. I think there are quite a lot of lessons that can be learned also for any future and development of more effective and democratically legitimate science for policy mechanisms. And it is really together with these changes that they are accompanied also by problems, but they also have a benefit. So it's this huge pressures on policy and politics which require to deliver fast and to solve complex problems. And I also agreed with Barish at the end of my talk to show you how this can actually be as well seen in action, where there was a request to solve really very complex problems. So knowledge production is challenged and has to cope with all these different challenges. And that is even now more so because it's complex. It's not only complex, but knowledge production is still taking place in thematic silos. So will you be able to overcome the thematic silos in your whole work when you work in the projects? Science and policy are often seen as two totally different worlds, actually sometimes even interfering in academic freedom for knowledge production. But from the little that we have learned from what is around us, it shows that if we do not bridge those two worlds, it will prevent us solving the complex problems. So it's very encouraging to read both of your projects and to see that you have put this also in the center of your work. What you also have put in the center of your work is the co-creation, this notion of co-creation. Co-creation is also a guiding principle now for Horizon Europe. It will be crucial not only within one specific project, but also interlinking different approaches, and which can really increase the dialogue, the trust, the understanding of needs, and the diversity of input and output. So co-creation also between doors and bridges can certainly increase the importance and impact of evidence for the benefit of public policy making. Both projects also carry quite important connotations in their acronyms. Doors leaves a lot of space to open them, to open the doors and enter into novel methodologies and complexity, hints again to the connectivity of many interfaces that can be built. Interesting also to see the creation of the Black Sea Helix community through the participation of Crowd Helix. So I wish you really a lot of good luck with this novel approach. And in addition to all the partners, of course, what is very important is that you have decided to focus on citizens. Citizens, coastal communities, which you have already now foreseen by integrating local stakeholder knowledge. So now my question to you is, will you also focus on training a new type of scientists for policy with a capacity to understand and value the challenges of the policy making? How far will there be constant interaction and cooperation between science and policy as one of your working methods? So these are just some of the questions I wanted to ask you. And I mention this because the trust between scientists and policymakers is probably the most important ingredient, allowing science to be fully used in the policy cycles. And we have heard through the previous speakers how important the implementation and the relationship of the strategic research and innovation agenda with the common maritime policy in the Black Sea is. So generally, I also know that to produce solutions that have traction in the real world, all relevant perspectives, including the values and perspectives, must be taken into account. And this is now even more so important in a digital age, because people will probably not any longer tolerate to be excluded from the debate. So there is still a gap between the supply of and the demand of policy relevant research. But when developing the SRIA, we had long discussions, you will remember, about the need to train policymakers, and I trust this will be addressed. However, it's also important to look at this from the angle of scientists. So will you also put into your project planning the need to include clear actions to achieve and increase the expected policy impact of science by informing on the pathways leading from activities to impact? So to do this, normally researchers need to understand the policy-making environment. But as I said, this is really, I leave that entirely up to you, how you will foster to really think impact mindset with, in the background, the relevance as well for policy making. Because science advice should not be a black box, in particular for public policy, where accountability towards the citizens is of primordial importance. And that's why science advice is, in my view, best placed on open data and open methods, which are reproducible and can be at all times reviewed by peer scientists. So when drafting the strategic research and innovation agenda, capacity building, training, competence development had been a central element, as you will certainly remember. And it's really good to see that this is now taken up in the project. And it will be now up to you to decide how many opportunities will you offer to the workforce, to the young people, to get actually a training on the spot through science, through their research activities, and how much will you include, for example, the youth ambassadors into the mainstream of the projects. The youth ambassadors claim that they would like to do more and not only be an added, something adds on as a youth ambassador. Why not challenging them and them into the full realm of your research activities? So these were just a couple of very personal suggestions and reflections on my side. And before I conclude, let me also look ahead. Horizon Europe, you know that the work program has been published. It is really the biggest ever research and innovation investment program. So it will as well really boost not only the blue economy, but most importantly, really recovery after the COVID. And that is probably the most important element. And let me just mention that Horizon Europe counts now with 3 mutually interacting instruments. So the main work programs, the Horizon Europe Partnership, and the future missions. So the first course of the work program have just been published in May. There is a wealth of opportunities always, albeit this time it is not earmarked specifically for the Black Sea, but if you look very carefully, you will always find opportunities to tap into. Secondly, the Horizon Europe strategic plan envisages also the creation of European partnerships. And of course, and this was also mentioned already by Wendy, the climate neutral, productive and sustainable blue economy partnership is one of those opportunities. There are others, like the one for clean energy transition, which will start in 22. The climate neutral, productive, sustainable blue economy partnership is at least planned to start in 23. There is also the Safe and Sustainable Food Systems Partnership, which is planned to start in 24. And all these are, together with many others, they are so-called co-funded candidate partnership between the European Union and the member states and associated countries. There is as well, but slightly different in terms of instrument, a third relevant candidate partnership. It's a co-program partnership on zero-emission waterborne transport. In the co-funding, of course, joint calls will be at the center, and I trust that there will be a dedicated meeting and discussion at the upcoming group of senior officials meeting in a couple of days, where all this will really be outlined and explained. It will be extremely important that Black Sea Connect, bridges, doors, and the many other really activities converge also into this partnership. And last but not least, let me also mention the mission, Ocean, Seas and Waters, as one of the big novelties. And that will really be, it will put the European Union and Europe on a path towards and equip it with the means of full restoration of the ocean and waters by 2050. It's really enabling the European Green Deal transitions, and as Commissioner Sinkiewicz always says, putting the blue into the green. So currently colleagues in the commissions are working now for a feasible, credible implementation plan for the mission, which will hopefully be finally adopted and endorsed by the Commission in September and then rolled out. So stay tuned, because there is much to come, and the missions aim really to generate solutions for reaching the EU objectives and 2030 targets for biodiversity, zero pollution and emissions reduction across ocean, seas and inland waters. There is also, I would not like to close my speech with not mentioning the UN Decade for Ocean Science, which with its many programs and activities is also really an occasion where you can show what you can achieve and how you can contribute to the objectives of the UN decade by delivering really your excellent results. So wherever we talk about the future mission, the partnership, it's or really in general the UN decade or Horizon Europe, it's now entirely up to you. It will depend on your engagement, on your active participation, on your enthusiasm and dynamism, how you really will contribute and make this happen. There is only one just about that. And now why I'm really focusing on this notion of one ocean and how what happens in one ocean affects also the others. I will hand over now to Barish and Pinar, asking to show a video about which you certainly know what happened in the Marmara Sea. So please show the video, and then I will still say one sentence to close. And with this, I mean, this was the kind of really showing you what happens, what's still happening, but how important really science results are to combat such crises, and how the link between what you do deliver and policy action, how important that is. And with that, I really want to conclude that whatever bridges and doors will deliver will hopefully prevent such future crises. And I wish you a lot of success and a lot really of enthusiasm to continue to work within those projects and to well connect it as well to Black Sea Connect and all the other initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ziggy. And Ziggy, actually, she is the initiator and the big supporter of the Black Sea Blue Growth initiative, and she still continues to supporting. And Ziggy, I still remember the first brainstorming meeting in 2017, how we met and how at least I was involved at that stage. So therefore I'm very happy that Ziggy was here today as a keynote speaker. And thanks a lot for accepting this and being here today with us.